Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Amy has an Azusa's Many Journeys that's going to hit 3 counters this turn. Nick has a Mirrorshell Crab, and he does not want Amy's card to turn into a creature. Can he stop this with the crab? Alright, so before I get started, I wanted to say that Mirrorshell Crab was actually one of the cards that had me the most excited from the new set. And if you know anything about me, you know that I love templating, and that's the reason why I was excited for this card. It has a template that we've never actually seen before on a Magic card. Normally, if you had a card that was going to do something like this, you would expect it to read something like what Disallow says, where it specifically spells out the types of abilities that you can counter. However, Mirrorshell Crab does nothing of the sort. It just says that it can counter any ability. Now, I'm kind of conflicted about how I feel about this because, well, it seems to me like this way would be a lot easier to get people confused about. So, for example, it is not possible for you to use the Mirrorshell Crab to counter the flying ability so that you would be able to block a flying creature with, say, a grizzly bear's. Now, it's not immediately obvious from just reading the card that this shouldn't be possible. So, what types of abilities can you counter with Mirrorshell Crab? And for that, I've got some kind of embarrassing news, which is that the change in templating is 100% cosmetic, and the stuff that you can target with the Mirrorshell Crab is exactly the same set of stuff that you would be able to counter with a Disallow. So, let me explain exactly why that is. Let's first remember that to counter something means to remove it from the stack so that it will have no effect and not resolve. And so, right away we can see that you need to be using the stack in order to counter something. Now, there are 4 different types of abilities in Magic. We already know that activated and triggered abilities we're going to be good on. However, spell abilities are going to be covered by the fact that you can counter spells directly, and the last type of ability, static abilities, does not use the stack. And so what that means is that we're stuck being able to only counter spells or activated abilities or triggered abilities, which is exactly the same stuff that Disallow can counter. Actually, you can't even counter all activated and triggered abilities. There's also mana abilities. See, a mana ability is a special type of activated ability, or a special type of triggered ability. The fact that they can add mana to your mana pool means that there's some extra special privileges that they get in the comprehensive rules to keep people from interfering with that. And one of those is that mana abilities do not use the stack. Remember, like what we were talking about earlier, because they do not use the stack, that means it's not going to be possible for you to use the crab, or anything else like Disallow, to counter them. So that's kind of a bummer. But enough doom and gloom. What kind of stuff could we counter with the crab? And I've got some good news for you, which is that it's actually a lot. So first of all, an activated ability is any type of ability where you can see a colon. And the colon separates the cost from the effects. And so anytime you see a colon in a card, that would be something that you would be able to counter with the crab, as long as it's not a mana ability. And so any triggered ability would mean anything that uses the words at, when, or whenever, because those words signal that something is a triggered ability. Again, you can't counter mana abilities, but there aren't a whole lot of triggered mana abilities, so I think you should be good on most of the triggered abilities that you would want to be able to counter. So now we're ready to finally move on to the question that I posed at the very beginning of the episode. And based on what we were just talking about, it looks like this might not work. After all, if you look at the saga, there isn't really anything that says at, when, whenever, or colon on there. And this is where we get to the final trick for this question, which is that sometimes you're not going to see those special words or punctuation marks on the actual physical card. Sometimes you're going to have to look in the comprehensive rules. So as you can see here, the thing that gives you the effect when the saga gets the appropriate number of counters on it is in fact a triggered ability that triggers when that counter gets put on there. And so that means that you would be able to use the crab against that triggered ability to counter it. And this is actually a pretty good play for Nick, because assuming that he's successfully able to counter that triggered ability, well, that's going to mean that Amy has a saga that has 3 lore counters on it and 3 chapter abilities, and so she's going to have to sacrifice that saga the next time state-based actions are performed. That's a pretty good value play. Now let's look at how the crab might interact with some of the other mechanics that are in the new set. So, for example, if you take a look at Ninjutsu's ability, well, you can see that the text in the comprehensive rules has a colon in it. And so that means that Ninjutsu is an activated ability. And so let's recall again that the colon separates the cost from the effects of the activated ability. And if you counter something, including an activated ability, then all of the costs that you paid for it are not going to get refunded. They're just gone. And so that means that if you were able to use the crab against a ninjutsu ability to counter it, well, the ninja would not be entering the battlefield, but the creature that they return to their hand is also not going to be coming back. So that could be a pretty big blowout. Another thing that works pretty similarly would be the crew mechanic. And so just like in the ninjutsu ability, you're not going to have that vehicle turn into a creature, but all the stuff that you tapped in order to crew that vehicle is going to stay tapped. You're not going to get to untap it just because the ability got countered. And finally, the last thing that I wanted to touch on is channel. You can see that channel is worded so that it has a colon in it, and that colon means that it's an activated ability. This means that you would not be able to stop it with a normal counter spell. You would need something a little bit more specialized, like Mirrorshell Crab. So that's a couple of really interesting examples of stuff that you would be able to use the Mirrorshell Crab's ability against and be able to counter with it. But I'm just scratching the surface here. What are your favorite things that you can counter with the Mirrorshell Crab? Leave your answers in the comments below. But that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again tomorrow for another daily ruling, but until then, I hope you have a great day.